All right, so we're going to be doing something a little different now. This is going to inaugurate a new little mini series on this channel. Right, we're going to call it MovieMacro. This is going to be MovieMacro number 1. I am here in Washington Square Park with Keith, right? Killer Keith, aka Special K, aka Big K, aka Mad Dog the Pussy Hunter. Right? And we just came from a movie screening called Clara Sola. It was a 2021 winner in some I believe it's like the official Swedish awards, right? It was the entry from Costa Rica.
Yeah, the Guldbagge awards.
Yeah, it won in what Best Picture, Best Cinematography, maybe Best Acting,
Best masturbation scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of masturbation here.
Yeah,
with
on multiple, like, you know, physical and theoretical levels.
Yeah, there's literal masturbation, and there's conceptually, right, this idea that, you know, just like a very self-indulgent film. And I'm actually kind of annoyed that, you know, of all the kind of things that could be the first entry, it's gonna be like a bad movie, right? I was hoping to inaugurate it with something good. And also makes me think that if I'm going to be doing these regularly with Keith or anybody else, we probably can't just go see contemporary films, because they're all mostly going to be like, you know, reviews of that film. So we're going to have to switch it up with some classics as well, right?
Well, unfortunately, we looked at the offerings on tap in New York City today, and the only other thing was a screening of Inland Empire by David Lynch that probably would have got a similarly scornful, albeit from a slightly different angle, type of review. So
yeah, and that's a 3-hour film. This is slightly under 2 hours, but it still felt really, really long.
It felt like 3 hours. It was a long hour and 40 minutes.
So, I mean, let's just talk about that, right? So, like, first thing, when I was sending you the trailers, right, you watched the trailer, I watched the trailer, and immediately you said something like, okay, I could see all the ways that this movie could be bad, the ways that this movie could be good. And I mean, I noticed that myself, right? You could tell with the trailer, you know, it's kind of like ambiguous oftentimes, right? Mm-hmm. Like, depending on the direction that it goes, depending on where it's pushed, right? It could go either way. And in this case, unfortunately, you know, some of the good that appeared, I think, is exactly not only this film's undoing, but the undoing of plenty of contemporary movies. I think one of the worst kind of you know, innovations to come in the last couple of decades was this introduction of like extremely like high definition, high fidelity film, right? Because I feel like if you could make things just physically in a literal sense look good, that gives directors this kind of almost this like warrant to just have lots of pointless but perhaps pretty scenes.
Yes.
Right? It gives them this kind of excuse to just totally indulge themselves.
Yeah, to the extent that there was good in this movie, and there really, it cannot be emphasized enough that there was very, very little. Some of the shots were okay. And really only some of them. Most of them were pretty much like screensaver type of nature photography, but there was a couple where the motion was a little bit interesting, not quite what you would expect. But I mean, that's exactly right when you say that, like, the only reason that it's even there is because of the availability of high definition digital film that allows them to basically just shoot whatever, you know, to go into the jungles in rural Costa Rica and just kind of shoot whatever they want and use whatever kind of looks good. You know, it's not like a considered artistic or cinematographic direction. It's just padding, basically, and not the good kind of nature padding like you might get in an Ozu movie where it serves like an aesthetic and a philosophical and a poetic function. It's just there so that you can continue playing the sort of like jangly, vague soundtrack over it.
Yeah, and I mean, even when you have, like, let's say so-called good imagery, good cinematography, like one thing from the trailers, right, where you think like, okay, this go either direction, you have like these constant shots of like hands moving about with sunlight on them. And I mean, it looks nice, but you know, there's one of two possibilities there. First, the possibility is this is a pointless image that it's just there for no reason, it's just there to be there. But the second possibility is, well, there is a reason. Clara she is this kind of like, maybe late 30s, early 40s healer, right? And maybe you put like sunlight on her hands or other people's hands to sort of emphasize this idea of like healing hands. But either way that you cut it, whether or not this is imagery for the sake of imagery, or whether it's that symbol specifically, and I think, it's meant to sort of be that symbol, it's a very kind of cheap symbol. It's a very obvious ploy, right? You know exactly what it's there for, right? It doesn't necessarily go anywhere beyond a symbol that's kind of heavy-handed, and there's a ton of like very heavy-handed symbolism, right? So Clara, she's both a healer as well as someone that is very much kind of infantilized by her family, right? They know that she is sort of useful to society by being a healer, but she's also not allowed to have any sort of like sexual exploration, right? It's kind of like a Christian household in some ways.
Yeah.
And she has to wear this corset because she has, it seems like, scoliosis, and that's also kind of very heavy-handed, though, isn't it? Like, a corset symbolizing a woman that is being repressed by her surroundings.
Yeah.
And to the extent that she's, we had the recent overturning of Roe v. Wade. Here's a woman that is useful to society, but only in the ways that we say that she could be useful. Whether she could be a baby factory or whether she could be a healer, right? It's always utility that is not necessarily utility that she wants for herself, right? So, I mean, just kind of like all heavy-handed symbolism throughout.
Yeah.
Right.
No, well, especially the invocation, like nature in the movie, whether it's
I'm going to get a little closer, by the way.
Whether it's the shots of a horse, bugs crawling into tunnels in the ground, leaves swaying in the wind. I mean, the nature in the movie serves a pretty like obvious and frankly like annoying and pat function of like sort of sexuality of something, unchained and raw and dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, like that's something that Werner Herzog made fun of Klaus Kinski for when they were making, I think, Fitzcarraldo like 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that Kinski's in the middle of the jungle and he's like, this is sexual power, this jungle. Like, come on. Like that was like, we know for a fact from that Herzog documentary that was considered like pat and obvious and kind of cringeworthy 40 years ago, and yet here it is being employed rather unironically by this. We should say this is the debut feature film of a Costa Rican Swedish filmmaker named Nathalie Álvarez Mesén, and let me tell you, this is not the way that you want to debut to the world. This is not the first face that you want to make, because it really does. Not only is it not a good movie, but it doesn't really portend like potential. It doesn't really suggest that this person, because this is the first movie that you are making, and it's a movie about a 36-year-old special needs woman who is kept in a tight box by her family and is released from it by exploring kind of her sexuality and attempting to assert autonomy over it. There's something intrinsically trite about that just in the description, and then it doesn't really go anywhere with the way that it does it. What did you think of the lead actress in the movie? Because I thought her performance was very, very one note. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's one note, and also just in terms of the casting choice, like her appearance, right? So you mentioned how, this like idea of like jungle imagery and like the sexual power or whatever, it's trite. It is, but another portion of this that's trite is just, so, of the entire family and all the other characters, she looks by far the most like explicitly native. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like what a like a colonial Costa. Well, first of all, this movie is set to be taking place in Costa Rica. I'm not exactly sure if you could, even with 100% certainty, say that that's the case just by what's in the film alone. It could be a lot of places, like just
you would have to know like the linguistic features of Costa Rican Spanish vis-a-vis other dialects of Spanish.
Oh, yeah. Maybe exactly. Maybe that's the reason why it's called Costa Rica. Maybe there is like clues like that, but beyond like whatever's going on linguistically, you don't know for a fact. But anyway, let's just assume for the sake of argument that it is. I mean, she clearly looks the most native, And it reminds me of this, I forget the name of this author, but in college I read this one novel for a class where it was by it wasn't a Native American, but it was a South American author, and she had a Native American character within that was just kind of like flipping out, over, like environmental destruction, like falling to the ground, on his knees, crying to the earth, as thunder was coming. And it's the same kind of idea here, right? It's, it's not any more subtle, right? It's not any more understated. It's kind of like, it is what it is, like in that regard. So in terms of the acting, I agree that it's fairly one note. It's kind of like it's veering between, on the one hand, she's like a little bit innocent, and then other times just kind of like flipping out.
Yeah, no,
right?
I believe I read that the lead actress is like more known as like a professional dancer in Costa Rica, and this is maybe her first like film role. And sometimes with casting non-actors, you can kind of get good raw sort of footage, like they don't have all the like actorly tics that can be distracting from the realism of something, and so you get something that looks a little, but it doesn't really come through in this one, because you can tell that she's really quite trying to act at times, like she's been coached in an ineffective way, and nobody else really stands out to me. I think the guy who plays the sort of like fantasy love interest of the main character, who the character's name is Santiago, I think that guy seemed like a reasonably talented actor to me. I would watch him in something else that was better written. To the extent that there is good outside of the cinematography, there's a couple of scenes that are sort of played as like he's trying to be nice to someone that he perceives as like childlike or simple. I mean, he would probably perceive her maybe as like autistic or intellectually disabled or something like that, but she sort of perceives it like flirtatiously. And it is sort of well realized in the way that you could see how each could take it in that way, if that makes sense. Like he thinks he's being a nice guy, she thinks that he's kind of flirting with her, that he's attractive or whatever. So there's a couple of scenes, a couple of lines that are okay along those lines, and I thought he was okay as an actor. But I mean, beyond that, like the thing with the nature, I mean, I didn't think about what you said about the main actress looking more indigenous than the rest of the cast, but that's absolutely true. And there's even a additional layer of triteness in that it is when she sort of overtly rejects the Roman Catholic theology of her grandmother and the village that she lives in, and sort of returns to nature and returns to an embrace of the earth or whatever, that she really gains like full control over her, what are shown to not just be like, vague, placebo effect kind of invocations, but actually possibly real healing powers that she has. She only gains full autonomy of them, whether for real or in her fantasy or whatever, when she rejects Roman Catholicism and burns down the shrine in their house and goes and wades in the river and is rejoined by her horse that may actually have been dead before she healed it. So just real trite shit all around, man. It's like, when you think about like an art movie, like the debut feature of a serious art house director, and like all the ways that could go bad, this goes bad in all of those ways. So
yeah,
unfortunate inauguration to this channel, I have to say, but this shot is very funny.
Another thing that I'm thinking about is so like, Santiago was a character, right? It just kind of like a lot of weird shit, like he's like having sex with a girl so he looks to be either in his 20s or 30s, and he's just kind of like in a very casual, matter-of-fact way having sex with a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah, you could tell the movie wasn't made in America, because somebody that is in it that is diegetically supposed to be 14 is having a sex scene on camera, and naked on camera.
But the weird part is, it's like, this Costa Rican family, they're not in the same category as like, natives or whatever that are like in poverty. They seem to be the equivalent of like whatever, middle class might be, right? They ultimately, throw that party. They seem to have these like, they have these like sensibilities that are, you know, puritanical, you know, being like, you know, religious Christian or whatever, and like, but like he's having sex with this little girl in her like grandmother's house, and like
they are the middle class of a very poor area. So it's kind of, I actually, I almost didn't mind that it was presented so matter-of-factly, because I would imagine in a lot of like less developed rural areas of the world, like relationships with fairly, you know, what would to us be kind of sizable age gaps, just because of like there's only so many people in an area, you know, and if there's more, like, you know, like a quinceañera is supposed to be that you are sort of entering womanhood, right? You know, like that's your initiation into adulthood in that culture. So I can almost kind of see it. It doesn't really explore it in any way, and I actually appreciate that it doesn't like try to interrogate the morality of it or whatever. It's just something that happens in the movie.
Yeah, but I found it a weird detail. I mean,
it is weird, yes.
Not just stuff for that, but also just like in general, the way that sex is treated in this film is like really, it's just really bad.
Yeah.
I remember like okay, so like first of all, so Clara is.
Your thumb's in front of the camera.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I know that everyone wants to see this fucking face, but
yes, of course.
What about you? What about you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna get a stick next time or whatever.
Face made for radio.
But anyway, so like one of the, so like Clara is like oftentimes watching, you know, they're all like sitting around watching TV at night, and sometimes there's like some sort of like sex scene, and she starts literally like masturbating in front of everybody, and so like her
to like makeup commercials.
And her mom gets mad, so she like keeps covering her fingers in like chili powder,
oil.
So that if she ends up like masturbating, she ends up like, you know, like hurting herself with it. In fact, you see like one time when she starts masturbating, afterwards she runs off and she gets the hose and she starts like washing her vagina because it's on fire.
Yeah.
And then like one night she gets like so upset, so she literally leaves in the middle of the night, and there's all these like fireflies, and she's like in the middle of the forest masturbating.
That was, I mean, you want to talk about like bad visuals from an art movie, like going down to the river to masturbate while fireflies light up around you. I mean, the only way it would be more trite is if the character was like 17 or 18 and it was like a story of like typical pubertal sexual awakening. Like the only subversion is that the character is supposed to be like in her late 30s, early 40s. That's the only way in which that is different from like the most trite kind of art film imagery that you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, and another thing about that is, like I remember like as we were like sitting around watching this, and I was taking notes on my notepad, and you were asking me like during that masturbation scene, and you were like what are you writing down? And I was like, oh, I just literally wrote masturbation amidst fireflies, just because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you wrote it down, because I actually did forget about it until you brought it up, until you looked at your notepad and brought it back up. So
yeah, let me see if there was like anything else that was worth talking about. My handwriting is so bad, so I don't even know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll just vamp for a sec and say that there's a couple of reviews that describe this as kind of like an art house version of the movie Carrie. If anybody, Alex is actually not familiar with this movie. It's a Brian De Palma movie from the 70s with Sissy Spacek, I believe, John Travolta. And basically the thrust of that movie is that this kind of shy, young, redheaded girl is ruled by this imperious, hyper-religious mother who is extremely verbally abusive to her. And she gets her first period at a very late age in the shower during gym class with a bunch of other girls, and they treat her horribly. Like, they start making fun of her because she freaks out about it. And then someone decides to make fun of her further by getting her boyfriend to ask her to prom, treat her nice, and then at the prom they dump a bucket of pig's blood on her. But because it's an adaptation of a Stephen King story, it turns out that Carrie has psychic powers, like telekinesis, And so she goes crazy during the dance, and she shuts all the doors, and she sets the gym on fire, and she kills all of her classmates that are making fun of her. And it's not a good movie, you know. But it's at least entertaining. You know, it wears its trashiness, like the central trashiness of its premise on its sleeve. It doesn't try to make something deep out of it. It doesn't try to turn it into something that it's not. It's basically just a fun time at the movies. This is not a fun time at the movies. This is a chore time at the movies. This is like this is a movie that you really like. I think we figured out it made like $6,000 or something like that.
Yeah, but then it won all these awards, so now it's going to be, you know, it's I'm sure it turned a nice profit.
Well, it won a bunch of Swedish awards, so I don't think that's going to get it any plaudits here. Yeah. But I mean, the IFC Center charged us $17 a ticket to see it, so we contributed $34 to that gross. But at least half of that has to be like people that were going with the critics, and the critics couldn't get them a comp. Like because otherwise I don't know who the market for this is, because it really is a slog. It's not good. So
you thought of Clari. The movie that I immediately thought of when I saw the direction it was going was there's this Korean film from, I believe it's 2002, 2001, Oasis by Chang Lee-dong. And I think that's an excellent movie. Dan Schneider has a lower opinion of it than I do. But I mean, it's a movie with, at minimum, excellent acting, perhaps some great acting in parts. You also have a woman that she doesn't have, like, first of all, Clara, I don't think has any kind of, she's sheltered, but she doesn't seem to have any kind of mental disability. In Oasis, there's, I believe she has cerebral palsy, so there's no mental issue involved. But you also see a woman that's been sheltered and is going through a sexual awakening, right? And both those characters are simply far more compelling. In fact, I did a review of that film you can find on Sheremet.com. If you search around for Oasis, you're going to find it there.
Yeah.
But that is a far superior movie, in every respect, whether it's cinematography, right, acting, or writing.
No, that's an excellent movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see where you're coming from with comparing them. It's a little bit like the movie kind of tries to have it both ways about what exactly is going on with Clara, or the reason it's called Clara Sola is because Sola is her secret name. She gives everything secret names
which means like alone.
Yeah,
and it's also so kind of like ham-fisted, right? It's
such
an obvious, and like to make that as a title, right? That's it's like ham-fist upon ham-fist.
Well,
right?
that's the thing is like if you are Spanish, you hear that title and you know that it means Clara alone. So it's
But even so, like in the movie,
like in English,
they spell it out also. They're like Clara alone.
Well,
right?
I do think that, but I could tell because all he says is Clara, and then the subtitle adds alone. So that was whoever wrote the subtitles making it more obvious for you. That wasn't actually the movie doing that. But I mean, regardless, like if you saw it in Spanish, it would be obvious to you, you know? So in a sense, the subtitles are doing what they're supposed to, which is making the experience of the movie as it would be if you were like fluent in Spanish, transparent to you. But I mean, the difference between something like this and Oasis is that they kind of try to have it both ways with what's going on with Clara, because sometimes it seems like maybe she might have like something cognitively going on with her, like a learning disability or autism or something like that. But other times it seems like she doesn't. Like maybe it's a Munchausen's by proxy kind of situation where the whole family has kind of decided that she's like simple and they treat her like that, and she's, like some of it's like a commentary on like the classical archetype of like the holy fool or whatever. Some of it is like, isn't Catholicism repressive? Which I'm sure there's not a million of those movies coming out of Central and South American like art school film departments these days. Some it's not very clear what's going on with it, but also like Lee Chang-dong when he made Oasis, he had an amount of like he wasn't afraid for the characters to have a lot of wrinkles to them. It wasn't just like, oh, look at everyone treating them like pieces of shit. Like sometimes the main character of that movie is also a piece of shit. And there's nothing that sticks out in your mind in this one, like the severely I think she has like extremely severe cerebral palsy or something like that in that movie. Like the scene where she stands up and like dances with the main character like in her fantasy in that movie, and it's presented very exactly. You know, that's there's a level on which that's a little bit obvious, and you probably get someone mad at it for ableism or whatever, but it's presented both very tenderly, kind of like a Chaplin movie almost, but also
it's
like
also just very fast, right? Those moments literally last just a few seconds at a time. They're not really drawn out. Like it's kind of
it's all drawn out in this movie.
Kind of thoughts, you know?
Yeah, it's everything like that in this movie is drawn out a lot. And it's made to see, like, it's not necessarily made to seem deep in that movie. It's made to kind of show you this character's psychic perspective, and then it goes back to what it was doing.
Yeah.
You know, whereas in this movie, it's actually meant to be deep.
Yeah.
You know, it's actually trying to imply that they're, and you know, your brain starts going, okay, well, you know, this is, you know, commenting also on like the Catholic idea of a good woman is like you know, an upholder of virtue, a morally righteous woman who doesn't have her way with herself or whatever, and her true power only comes when she throws that off and explores her sexuality and tries to take command of it and have sex with Santiago during her niece's quinceañera. But that's not deep. That's just like, you know, that's like the most like, you know, kiddie pool version of like feminist symbolism that you could almost put in a movie.
Yeah, there's a couple moments since you mentioned the when the girl was turning 15, she has this party. There's a couple moments where you know exactly where things are going.
Yeah.
One of them at the beginning is when Clara tells Santiago and I believe what is it, like her I guess it's her niece or like something. She tells her something like. Oh, you know, it's about to rain, and both of them say, I don't think so, and then Santiago's like, yeah, I don't think either. And you know for a fact that it's gonna rain, and it's just gonna prove how in touch with nature that she is and how out of touch everybody else is.
Yes.
And also, as soon as kind of like the party started and you see her being bored, I was like, all right, she's gonna have a fucking meltdown at some point in this party.
Yeah. And
not only does she have a meltdown, she seems to cause an earthquake on top of that. So like, there's like spots where like you know exactly where things are going. You know, like if you've seen movies before, right? If you know how art works, and you know what the predictable routes are and what the unpredictable routes are, you know, you could tell it was going to go in that predictable route.
Well, the problem is once a movie has like gone the predictable route about at least half a dozen times within like the first 20 to 30 minutes of the movie, then it just ruins the rest of the movie for you, because you know where everything is going to go, and even if it goes a slightly different direction, it doesn't, like, it just feels like a cheap subversion when everything else has gone the predictable direction. You know, like you either, like, honestly, you either have to commit and go full Hollywood and at least possibly make something like that's like has like a candy kind of quality. You know, where like, you know, it's bad for you, but at least you might get that kind of like junky feeling from it. Or you have to go like the full art route and like actually commit to doing something interesting and subversive and defying of cliche. Because when you go a middle route where it's like very occasionally it does something different than what you expect, but for the most part it goes, you know, every which way that you could possibly imagine it going, then it just pisses you off. Yeah. You know, it's just like, I was like, I knew within the first 10 minutes of us sitting down to watch this movie, they were like, oh no, maybe we should have seen Inland Empire. At least that might have been bad in an interesting way. Yeah. Because this wasn't even interesting. But then like by an hour in, I was just fucking mad at the movie. You know, it's just like,
I honestly, I had to calm Keith down. I was like, Keith, it's like 55 minutes left right now. We're past the halfway point.
Yeah. Well, because it's like, you know, honestly, like like artists should have fucking consideration for their audience, man. Like, I'm asking somebody to watch this. Yeah. You know, like, you know, when you talk about the idea that like art has a responsibility or whatever, like everyone talks about the political responsibilities of art. It's like, what about the responsibility of my time not to be wasted? You know, like that this is a better use of my time than like I could, like she's masturbating in the movie. I could be masturbating right now. You know, like there's anything else that I could be doing that would be more useful than this. You know, like you have to justify like the expenditure of somebody's time on a work of art. And I don't know how Nathalie Álvarez Mesén, whatever her last name is, like justified to herself that this was a way to spend an hour and 45 minutes of people's time.
Well, going back to what we were talking about prior to watching the movie, we were taking a nice little walk.
Yeah.
We were talking about how, like, when it comes to contemporary artists, right, so many of them, they're like, oh, this is all about activism, right? This is about, we have to make a change in the world through our blah, blah. The point I was making was, like, even if that's true, if you don't make the art somehow different, unique, well sketched, how are you gonna make anybody agree with you, other than like the people that are already kind of are in your choir, right? Like the people that already agree with you, these are not the people you need to convert, right? The people that are perhaps down the middle, perhaps are not even thinking about these questions. What they need is, they need to be switched on, tapped into in some kind of way that they're not used to, right?
Yeah.
And this is just kind of, these are very stereotypical looks at feminism. These are very stereotypical looks at things like healing. With the
the controlling nature of
yeah.
religion in rural life or whatever.
Yeah. So like like I can guarantee you that anybody that is like on the fence about some things, or even hostile, they're not going to be in any way moved by this thing to change their minds on whatever, right? Because they've heard similar things before, and on top of that, if you get like a real kind of fucking hate, they'll be like, what the fuck, a 14-year-old being fucked, and they're gonna like like boycott this, and
no, this is if this shows up on Netflix, it's gonna be cuties.
Yeah, it's grooming. Well, I mean, you got anything else to say about this?
2 thumbs down.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
we're gonna have to do a classic next time.
Unfortunately, I'm the chubbier of the two of us, so that makes me Ebert. I'm Ebert. 2 thumbs down.
Yeah, my thumb was in the air.
Siskel here, both because he's skinnier and because his hairline is receded more than mine. He also gives a thumbs down.
Because I lost a lot of weight. Look at that shit.
Yeah.
Look at that. I got some skin though. Gladly, like my titties and my abdomen, looks good after a lot of time to work on it. But you can't get rid of that. What are you gonna do? You're gonna work in your neck?
I mean, you got to go get some work done, Poppy.
Nah, that's the thing, about like plastic surgery. You can't hate yourself. You gotta love yourself. That's what I learned. You gotta love yourself no matter what. But anyway,
that's the moral of the movie.
All right.
We saved you an hour and 40 minutes. Love yourself.
All right. So this has been Movie Macro #1. If you want to support, the dirtiest, grimiest literary and art and film criticism on the internet, you could go to 2 places, automachination.com, to read all the essays, to get all your needs met, and especially you could go to patreon.com/automachination. I recently opened up a Patreon. You could help me do this shit all the time. Maybe Keith and I, you could pay for our movie tickets, you could pay for our lunches, right? Maybe before, after. Maybe one time we'll be like sitting at a restaurant, you can watch us eat, just like disgusting like noodles coming out our mouths.
Oh my god, we went to this this vegan place beforehand, and I got the vegan pulled pork, and let me tell you, it was a disgusting mess, and you guys can see all of it.
Yeah, but it was good though. It was a disgusting mess, but it was good.
Yeah, well, no, it was pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, I had 3 dumplings and a little salad. Yeah. Right, that's what it came with for me. And in the morning, all I ate, I had a 1 hour like jogging type walk. I had a protein bar, and I had some green tea with soy milk. And I'm still not hungry. You know why, guys? Because I'm taking a little marijuana break, right? I've been on a break for a while now.
Yeah.
So I don't get hungry anymore. That's the thing. I used to be obsessed with food, right? I used to have like food problems. I used to use food as comfort when I was a kid. But when I got over that, you can't really compel me to eat that much more. If I get high, all right, I'm gonna eat. I'm gonna get fucking sick, okay? I'll be fucking sick. But if that's not happening, if I'm on a break, if I'm on a tea break, guess what happens? Right? All you get to see is this. Right? You get to see me getting skinny and skinnier. But again, patreon.com/automachination. Let me show you guys the beautiful clouds to channel Clara Sola. It might rain, right? Hopefully it won't rain by the time that we make it to Union Square Market. We're going to pig out maybe on a little bit of a whole grain niche, maybe some whole grain pretzels, maybe some of those muffins made from it's chickpea flour, it's applesauce, it's pumpkin seeds. I love those kinds of desserts because you could really pig out but feel really nice afterwards. Like, but again, right? I want to and just imagine the clouds, right? Imagine the clouds right now. If you want to talk about cinematography, just imagine the clouds forming the words. Patreon.com/automachination, and you're really going to help us out. All right, so thanks for watching. This has been Movie Macro #1. We're going to come back with 2, 3, 4, a dozen, baker's dozen, 24, 30, 40, hopefully make it to 100, 200. And listen, the more that you pay, the more that you get, right? Because subscribers are going to get some things that only subscribers get, right? I'm going to have at the end of this month, I'm going to put some shit up that you really, really want to see, right? I'm not even going to tell you what it is, but you really want to see this video, right? I'm going to keep it as a surprise. And the only people that will know what it is are those that subscribe. So I'm really going to do this hard sell, right? I don't give a fuck anymore. I've been giving so much free shit for so many people for so long, right? I'm going to be a hard-ass businessman from now on. So if you want this shit, guess what, baby? You're going to pay for it, right? You're going to pay for it, bitch.